Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Golden Promises. Bryce Harmon stood at the edge of the construction site, surveying what would soon become Axiom Tower, the jewel of Lakeshire's skyline. At 32, he'd built Harmon Construction from nothing into one of the region's most respected firms. The evening sun glinted off his engagement ring as he checked his watch. He was meeting Vanessa at Bellamy's in an hour to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. "Looking good, boss," called Miles Dennison, his foreman and oldest friend since their foster care days. "We're ahead of schedule." "Not good enough," Bryce replied with a half smile. "I promised Axiom we'd be done 2 weeks early." Miles shook his head. "Always pushing." "How's Vanessa handling the wedding preparations?" "She's in her element. Guest list is up to 300 now." Bryce ran his hand through his dark hair. "Her father finally warmed up to me. I think proving I could match their family fortune helped." The truth was more complicated. Douglas Reynolds, shipping magnate and Lakeshire's old money elite, had made no secret of his disdain for Bryce. A self-made man with questionable origins wasn't his idea of a suitable match for his daughter. But Vanessa had chosen Bryce, captivated by his rugged charm and relentless ambition. Their romance had been a whirlwind. Vanessa Reynolds, socialite, philanthropist, and the city's most eligible bachelorette, had literally crashed into his life when her Tesla collided with his truck at a stoplight. What began as an angry exchange of insurance information ended with dinner at Lakeshire's most exclusive restaurant. 6 months later, he proposed with a flawless 5-carat diamond. "Still can't believe you tamed Lakeshire's princess," Miles teased. "Though that crowd she runs with, especially that Wexler guy, they still look at you like you're the help." Bryce's jaw tightened. "Tristan Wexler is her childhood friend. Nothing more." "If you say so." Miles changed the subject. "How's the beach house coming?" "Finishing touches. It's Vanessa's wedding gift." Bryce hadn't told his fiancée about the oceanfront property he'd purchased and renovated. It represented everything: his success, their future, the family they would build together. As Bryce left the construction site, his phone chimed with a text from Vanessa, running late. "Charity meeting with Tristan. Meet at 8 instead. Love you." Bryce ignored the familiar twinge of unease and replied with a simple "see you then." Their wedding was 3 weeks away. Nothing could possibly go wrong now. Chapter 2, Shattered Reflection. Pain. Blinding, all-consuming pain. Bryce's consciousness flickered between darkness and harsh fluorescent lights. Frantic voices echoed around him. Multiple fractures, severe facial lacerations, 3rd-degree burns. The helicopter crash replayed in fragments. The client meeting at the mountain resort. The unexpected snowstorm. The pilot's strained voice announcing mechanical failure. The violent impact as they hit the mountainside. The searing heat of flames against his skin as he dragged the unconscious pilot from the wreckage before collapsing. 3 days later, Bryce awoke in the burn unit. Miles was there, his expression telling Bryce everything before the doctors explained. The right side of his face and body had sustained severe burns and lacerations. He'd undergone the first of what would be many reconstructive surgeries, but the doctors were clear. The scarring would be permanent and significant. "Vanessa?" Bryce asked, his voice barely a whisper. "She's been here," Miles answered, not meeting his eyes. She needed some air." When Vanessa finally visited, her reaction was worse than anything Bryce could have imagined. She flinched visibly at the sight of him, her perfect features contorting into poorly disguised repulsion. "They say you were heroic," she said, maintaining distance from his bed. "Saving the pilot like that. Where have you been?" Bryce asked, noticing the absence of her engagement ring. Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been trying, Bryce, but I can't. I just can't do this." "Do what?" His heart raced despite the medication. "The doctor showed me simulations of what you'll look like after all the surgeries. You'll still be disfigured." She looked away. "I can't walk down the aisle to, this isn't what I signed up for." The words hit harder than the helicopter crash. "Vanessa, it's still me." She finally met his gaze, her blue eyes cold. "You're too ugly for me now, Bryce." She placed the engagement ring on his bedside table. "We both know appearances matter in my world. No one will want you looking like this." As she turned to leave, Bryce glimpsed Tristan Wexler waiting in the hallway, his hand reaching for Vanessa's as soon as she exited. Through the haze of pain medication, something crystallized in Bryce's mind. This wasn't just about his scars. This betrayal had been brewing long before the crash. Chapter 3: Ashes and Embers. The next 18 months nearly destroyed Bryce. The physical pain of multiple surgeries paled compared to watching his life unravel. Harmon Construction hemorrhaged clients after his extended absence. The banks circled like vultures as projects fell behind. His life savings evaporated into medical bills not covered by insurance. The final blow came when Axiom Tower, his pride and joy, was reassigned to Wexler Development. That night, Miles found Bryce in his apartment, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and newspaper clippings announcing Vanessa and Tristan's engagement. "You look like shit," Miles said bluntly, opening the curtains to let in sunlight for what seemed like the first time in months. "Did you know she was sleeping with him while we were engaged?" Bryce asked, his voice hollow. "I suspected." Miles sat across from him. "Everyone in Lakeshire is talking about their fairy tale romance. How they were always meant to be together." Bryce laughed bitterly. "They're calling it a blessing in disguise that the accident revealed her true feelings before we married." "Accident?" Miles frowned. "The helicopter crash. Mechanical failure," they said. Bryce pushed forward a folder he'd obtained from a private investigator. Except it wasn't. Someone tampered with the fuel line. Miles flipped through the photos, his expression darkening. "You think Wexler arranged it? I think he wanted me out of the way. Dead would have been convenient. Disfigured was an acceptable alternative." Bryce stood, steadier than he'd been in months. "The crash was meant to eliminate me. Instead, it revealed who my enemies are." That night, after Miles left, Bryce stood before the mirror, truly examining his scars for the first time. The right side of his face was a landscape of ridged tissue and grafted skin. His once handsome features were now a stark contrast of before and after. "No one will want you," Vanessa's words echoed. Bryce's fist crashed into the mirror, shattering his reflection into 1,000 pieces. As blood dripped from his knuckles, something awakened within him, a cold, calculated resolve. He would rebuild himself, his body, his fortune, his power, and when he had everything, he would take from them what they valued most. Not with the quick vengeance of a wounded animal, but with the patient, methodical destruction of a predator who knows exactly when to strike. Chapter 4: Phoenix Strategy. 3 years after the crash, Bryce Harmon had vanished from Lakeshire's social consciousness. In his place emerged B.R. Harmon, founder of Phoenix Ventures, a shadowy investment firm operating from Seattle. Few connected the reclusive financier to the failed construction company owner. Bryce preferred it that way. The extensive reconstructive surgeries had restored functionality, but left him with a distinctive appearance. He'd grown a precisely trimmed beard to cover the worst scars and adopted custom-tailored suits that exuded power and commanded respect. His transformation began with Vivian Mercer, a venture capitalist who'd seen something in Bryce when she visited him in physical therapy. "You've got the hunger," she'd said, "the kind that comes only after you've lost everything." Under Vivian's mentorship, Bryce leveraged his intimate knowledge of construction and real estate, combined with an almost supernatural ability to predict market trends. Phoenix Ventures specialized in rescuing failing projects, turning them profitable with ruthless efficiency. Miles remained his only connection to his former life, now serving as Phoenix's chief operating officer. Together, they built an empire in the shadows, with one purpose driving every acquisition: positioning Bryce to return to Lakeshire at the perfect moment. The Reynolds-Wexler wedding announcement is everywhere. Miles mentioned during their weekly strategy meeting, sliding a society page across the desk. Bryce glanced at the photo of Vanessa in Tristan's arms, her smile radiant as she showed off her enormous diamond ring. 4 years of engagement. Interesting, they're only now setting a date. Wexler Development is struggling, Miles explained. The Axiom Tower is behind schedule, and over budget. Word is Douglas Reynolds finally issued an ultimatum. Finish the tower and marry his daughter, or lose both. Bryce leaned back in his chair, satisfaction curling his lips. What's the status of Horizon Partners? They're desperate. The pandemic crushed their liquidity. They'll accept our offer. Horizon Partners owned 30% of Wexler Development's debt that would soon belong to Phoenix Ventures. And the other matter? Miles handed him another folder. Found him. The helicopter mechanic. He left the country after the crash, but he's back now. Inside was surveillance footage of a man drinking alone in a dive bar. Antonio Diaz, the maintenance worker who'd been paid to sabotage Bryce's helicopter. Arrange a meeting, Bryce said quietly. It's time he told us who hired him. 3 nights later, a terrified Diaz confirmed what Bryce had suspected. Tristan Wexler had paid him $50,000 to ensure the helicopter would experience catastrophic mechanical failure. What Wexler hadn't counted on was Bryce's determination to survive. With Diaz's signed confession secured, Bryce made his final preparations. Phoenix Ventures acquired the small but respected Lakeshire Financial Chronicle, and Bryce selected the perfect property to serve as both his residence and the new Phoenix headquarters, a towering penthouse overlooking Axiom Tower. Are you sure about this timeline? Miles asked as they finalized the details. Once we make these moves, there's no turning back. Bryce stared out at the Seattle skyline one last time. I've waited 4 years. It's time Lakeshire remember my name. Chapter 5. Calculated Ascension. Bryce's return to Lakeshire was meticulously orchestrated. Phoenix Ventures announced its relocation with the purchase of the Hammond Building, a historic landmark directly across from Axiom Tower. The local business community buzzed with speculation about the mysterious B.R. Harmon, who had amassed a fortune seemingly overnight. Vivian Mercer arranged Bryce's first public appearance at the annual Chamber of Commerce Gala, an event certain to include the Reynolds and Wexler families. Remember, Vivian cautioned as they entered the ballroom, your goal tonight isn't revenge. It's establishing dominance. The room quieted as they entered. Bryce, now 37, carried himself with the magnetic confidence of a predator. The scars visible above his beard only added to his mystique. His custom Brioni suit and the intensity of his gaze drew attention from everyone, particularly Vanessa Reynolds. She stood across the room beside Tristan, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock as recognition slowly dawned. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Looks like your ex-fiancée remembers you, Vivian murmured. She's not important tonight, Bryce replied, though he noted with satisfaction how Vanessa whispered urgently to Tristan, whose face drained of color. Douglas Reynolds approached first, business instincts overriding social awkwardness. Mr. Harmon, we're honored to have Phoenix Ventures in Lakeshire. I don't believe we've formally met. Actually, we have, Bryce replied, his voice deeper and more commanding than in his previous life. I was once engaged to your daughter. Reynolds paled. Bryce? We thought you'd left Lakeshire. I did. Now I'm back. Bryce scanned the room, noting the whispers spreading like wildfire. Phoenix Ventures has significant plans for this city. Throughout the evening, Bryce navigated the social battlefield with precision. He announced Phoenix's first Lakeshire project, a $300 million development that would employ local workers, specifically those laid off when Wexler Development downsized. He watched Tristan seethe from across the room, unable to confront the man who was simultaneously his greatest nightmare and his potential financial savior. Horizon Partners had made it known that Phoenix now held significant leverage over Wexler Development. The next morning, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle's front page featured Bryce's photograph under the headline, Phoenix Rises, Mysterious Billionaire Returns to Transform Lakeshire. Within weeks, Bryce had systematically infiltrated every aspect of Lakeshire's business community. He donated $20 million to the hospital that had treated his burns, establishing the Harmon Center for Reconstructive Surgery. He purchased the land surrounding Wexler's flagship development, effectively controlling access to utilities and transportation. When Axiom Corporation expressed concerns about Wexler Development's delays, Bryce was there with solutions and alternatives. His revenge wasn't just personal, it was comprehensive. "Vanessa's been asking about you," Miles reported during their daily briefing. "She's reached out to mutual acquaintances, trying to arrange an accidental meeting." Bryce smiled coldly. "Make sure she gets nowhere near me. And Wexler, he'll come to us soon enough. He has no choice." Bryce examined the latest financial reports. "How are we positioned for the market correction?" "Perfectly. When it hits, we'll be able to acquire everything on our list, including controlling interest in Reynolds Shipping." The economic downturn struck 2 months later, precisely when Bryce had predicted. As businesses throughout Lakeshire struggled, Phoenix Ventures thrived, strategically acquiring competitors and suppliers until Bryce controlled a business ecosystem that quietly strangled Wexler Development's operations. The Lakeshire Financial Chronicle, now firmly under Bryce's editorial direction, ran a cover story featuring his full-page photograph, "Visionary Leader: How B.R. Harmon Became Lakeshire's First Billionaire." That evening, Bryce's phone registered the first of what would become hundreds of calls from Vanessa Reynolds. He let it ring unanswered. Chapter 6: Perfect Positioning. The market correction Bryce engineered devastated Wexler Development. Tristan's company, already struggling with the over-budget Axiom Tower, now faced bankruptcy. The Reynolds-Wexler wedding was postponed indefinitely as Tristan scrambled to save his family's legacy. Bryce watched from his penthouse as workers removed the Wexler Development logo from the Axiom Tower construction site. Phoenix Ventures had acquired the project through a web of shell companies, ensuring neither Tristan nor Douglas Reynolds knew who had delivered the killing blow. "Wexler's requesting a meeting," Miles announced, entering Bryce's office with a satisfied grin. "Says he has a proposal that could benefit both parties." "Schedule it for Friday," Bryce replied. "Let him stew a few more days." "And Vanessa?" "That's her 218th voicemail since the magazine cover." Miles held up Bryce's phone with its notification of missed calls. "Have you analyzed the messages?" "As you requested. First 20 were shock and questions. Next 50 were reminiscing about good times. After that, increasingly desperate appeals about how she never stopped loving you and made a terrible mistake." Miles grimaced. "Latest ones suggest she's willing to leave Wexler if you'll just speak with her." Bryce's expression remained impassive. "Keep monitoring. Don't respond." His revenge required perfect timing. Every day Vanessa's calls went unanswered increased her desperation. Every hour Tristan waited for a meeting diminished his leverage. Meanwhile, Bryce continued his public ascension. He established the Phoenix Foundation, focusing on burn survivors and children from foster care. His carefully cultivated public image was that of a scarred yet compassionate titan of industry, a man who had overcome personal tragedy to build an empire. Few connected these philanthropic efforts with systematic destruction of the Reynolds-Wexler business interests. By the time Douglas Reynolds realized his shipping company was being strangled by Phoenix-controlled ports and logistics companies, it was too late. On Thursday night, one day before Tristan's scheduled meeting, Bryce attended the governor's ball alone. He had declined all romantic entanglements during his rise to power, focusing solely on his mission. This single-mindedness created an aura of mystery that only enhanced his appeal. As expected, Vanessa was there, radiant in a designer gown, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. Throughout the evening, she maneuvered closer to Bryce, finally intercepting him near the terrace doors. "Bryce," she breathed, touching his arm lightly. "Please, I've been trying to reach you." He regarded her with detached interest, as one might observe an insect. "Ms. Reynolds, how unexpected. I've called you hundreds of times." Her blue eyes searched his face, lingering on his scars with fascination rather than revulsion now. "We need to talk." "Do we? What happened between us?" "I was wrong. Terribly wrong." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've regretted it every day." Bryce glanced meaningfully at her engagement ring. "Your fiancé might disagree. Tristan and I, it's complicated. It was never what I truly wanted." She stepped closer, her perfume enveloping him. "You've changed. Become something extraordinary." "Yes," Bryce agreed coldly. "I have. Perhaps we could start again." Her hand rested on his chest, an intimate gesture captured by several nearby photographers. Dinner tomorrow night? For a moment, Bryce allowed himself to remember how deeply he had once loved this woman, how completely her betrayal had shattered him. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full," he said finally. "I have a meeting with Mr. Wexler tomorrow that may run late." Vanessa paled. "With Tristan?" "What?" "Business," Bryce replied vaguely. "Though I understand congratulations are in order. The wedding is back on." "No. I mean technically, but she composed herself." "Bryce, whatever Tristan wants from you, I should warn you." "Ms. Reynolds," Bryce interrupted, "you had your opportunity to warn me 5 years ago, when I was in a hospital bed, and you decided I was too disfigured to love." He stepped away from her touch. "You've made 218 attempts to contact me. I've ignored everyone. That should tell you everything you need to know about my interest in rekindling any relationship with you." As he walked away, Bryce finally felt a measure of the satisfaction he'd been working toward. But it was merely an appetizer. The main course would be served tomorrow, when Tristan Wexler walked into his office, not knowing he was meeting with the man whose life he had tried to destroy. Chapter 7. Masks Removed. Tristan Wexler arrived at Phoenix Ventures precisely at 2 p.m., escorted by Miles to the executive conference room rather than Bryce's office. The subtle power move wasn't lost on Tristan, whose once impeccable appearance now showed signs of strain. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Mr. Harmon will join you shortly," Miles informed him, offering no refreshments. Bryce watched through the one-way glass, savoring the moment. He'd waited 5 years for this confrontation, meticulously constructing every detail. When he finally entered, Tristan rose quickly, extending his hand. "Mr. Harmon, thank you for seeing me. Your reputation precedes you." Bryce ignored the outstretched hand. "Does it? Which reputation would that be, Mr. Wexler?" Confusion flickered across Tristan's features. "Your business acumen, of course. Phoenix Ventures has made remarkable inroads in Lakeshire." "Interesting." Bryce circled the table slowly. "I wonder what else you know about me." "Only what everyone knows. You're something of a mystery man." Tristan attempted a collegial smile. "Though I understand you may have previously lived in Lakeshire." "I did." Bryce sat at the head of the table. "In fact, Mr. Wexler, we've met before." "Have we?" "I don't recall." 5 years ago. You were visiting Vanessa Reynolds at Lakeshire Memorial Hospital. She had just returned my engagement ring." The blood drained from Tristan's face. "Bryce, in the flesh, what's left of it?" Bryce's smile never reached his eyes. "Surprised I survived the helicopter crash you arranged?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Tristan stammered, half rising from his chair. Bryce slid a folder across the table. "Antonio Diaz's signed confession detailing how you paid him to sabotage my helicopter. The police have a copy. So does my attorney. And if anything happens to me, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle will run it as their cover story." Tristan sank back into his chair, his arrogance evaporating. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand what's happening." Bryce pressed a button, and screens around the room illuminated with financial documents. Phoenix Ventures now controls 62% of Wexler Development's debt. We own the land surrounding your remaining projects. We've acquired your suppliers, your contractors, and your financing. "You've been systematically destroying my company," Tristan whispered. "I've been systematically destroying you," Bryce corrected. "Your company is merely collateral damage." "Is this about Vanessa?" "She chose me." "After you try to have me killed," Bryce interrupted. "But no, this isn't about Vanessa. She's irrelevant." The words struck deeper than Bryce expected. Vanessa had truly become irrelevant to him, a realization that confirmed his transformation was complete. "Here's what happens next," Bryce continued, sliding another document across the table. "You will sign Axiom Tower and all associated properties over to Phoenix Ventures for $1. That's a $400 million project, which you can't complete without my cooperation. Your alternative is bankruptcy and prison for attempted murder." Tristan's hands trembled as he processed his options. "And if I sign, Phoenix absorbs Wexler Development. You retain a figurehead position with no actual authority. You will announce that your engagement to Vanessa Reynolds is over, and you will leave Lakeshire permanently within 30 days. My family has been here for generations. Your family is in Connecticut, where you'll be relocating. A modest position has been arranged with a property management firm. You'll earn enough to live, but never enough to rebuild. And if I refuse? Bryce leaned forward. Then I'll take everything anyway, but you'll do it from prison. Antonio Diaz is very eager to testify against the man who promised to protect him, but then abandoned him. Tristan stared at the document, defeat etched in every line of his face. You've thought of everything. I've had 5 years to plan this moment. Bryce placed a pen beside the contract. Your choice. As Tristan shakily signed each page, Bryce felt not the rush of victory he'd expected, but a cold, hollow satisfaction. This was merely the first phase of justice. One question, Tristan said, signing the final page. How did you do it? Rebuild yourself after. You made a fundamental miscalculation, Bryce replied, taking the signed contract. You believe my value was in my face, my construction company, my relationship with Vanessa. You thought by taking those, you'd destroy me. He stood, towering over his defeated enemy. But you merely stripped away everything that wasn't essential. What remained was something far more dangerous, a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. As Tristan was escorted from the building, Bryce turned to Miles. Initiate Phase 2. Chapter 8. The Dismantling. News of Tristan and Vanessa's broken engagement dominated Lakeshire's social circles for precisely 2 days before being overshadowed by the announcement that Phoenix Ventures had acquired Wexler Development. The business community reeled from the sudden consolidation of power. Tristan departed quietly for Connecticut, his reputation in tatters after leaked documents suggested financial improprieties in his management of Axiom Tower. The leak, carefully orchestrated by Bryce, ensured that even if Tristan ever attempted to return to Lakeshire, no one would do business with him. With Tristan eliminated, Bryce turned his attention to Douglas Reynolds. The shipping magnate had once dismissed Bryce as unworthy of his daughter. Now, he faced the systematic dismantling of his empire. Reynolds Shipping lost the Eastport contract, Miles reported during their morning briefing. Their stock dropped 17% overnight. Increase our position, Bryce instructed. I want controlling interest by month's end. The call from Douglas Reynolds came 3 days later, requesting an urgent meeting. Bryce agreed to see him at the Phoenix Foundation Charity Gala, a public venue where Reynolds would be at a disadvantage. You're destroying my company, Reynolds accused, cornering Bryce on the balcony overlooking the gala. Why am I? Bryce sipped his whiskey. Perhaps you're simply facing market forces beyond your control. This is personal. It's about Vanessa. Mr. Reynolds, your daughter made her choice 5 years ago. She's irrelevant to my current business decisions. Then why target my shipping lines? Why block our port access? Bryce turned to face him fully. 5 years ago, your daughter told me I was too disfigured to love. She said no one would want me. You supported her decision, called it sensible in the circumstances. Reynolds had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was unfortunate, but unfortunate. Bryce's voice remained controlled, but eyes formed around each word. While I was at my lowest point, your family revealed exactly who they were. Now that I'm at my highest, I'm returning the favor. What do you want? Money? An apology? I want you to experience exactly what I did. Watching helplessly as everything you've built is taken from you. Bryce smiled coldly. The difference is you have somewhere to fall. Your family money will cushion you. You'll regret this vindictiveness, Reynolds warned. Vanessa is devastated. She truly regrets what happened. She regrets backing the wrong horse, Bryce corrected. She chose Tristan thinking he was the path to greater wealth and status. Now she sees her mistake. He finished his drink. Give her a message from me, Mr. Reynolds. The next time she calls, I might actually answer, just to tell her that her father is about to lose control of Reynolds Shipping. The following week, Phoenix Ventures launched its most aggressive move yet, initiating a hostile takeover of Reynolds Shipping. The maneuver, combined with the strategic alliances Bryce had formed, left Douglas Reynolds no viable defense. Meanwhile, Vanessa grew increasingly desperate. Her calls to Bryce continued, now accompanied by handwritten letters and attempts to contact him through mutual acquaintances. When those failed, she resorted to appearing at Phoenix Foundation events, only to be politely but firmly turned away by security. Her final attempt came on the evening Phoenix Ventures announced its successful acquisition of Reynolds Shipping. Vanessa bypassed security by claiming a medical emergency, making it all the way to Bryce's private elevator before Miles intercepted her. "He doesn't want to see you," Miles told her plainly. "Please," she begged, her perfect composure cracking. "5 minutes. I need to explain." "Explain what?" Miles asked. "How you abandoned him when he needed you most. Or how you're only interested now that he's powerful and wealthy." "It's not like that. I made a terrible mistake." Tears streaked her makeup. "I love him." "No, Ms. Reynolds, you don't. You love what he represents. Redemption for your catastrophic miscalculation." Miles ushered her toward the exit. "Mr. Harmon has moved on. I suggest you do the same." As security escorted Vanessa from the building, Bryce watched from his office window. The woman who had once been the center of his world now appeared small and insignificant. "Are you sure about this next phase?" Miles asked, joining him at the window. "It crosses a line." "They crossed the line first," Bryce replied. "Is everything prepared?" Miles nodded. "The documents are ready. Once released, there's no going back." Bryce turned away from the window. "Release them." The next morning, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle ran an explosive exposé revealing that the Reynolds family fortune, supposedly built on shipping innovation, had actually originated from Prohibition-era bootlegging and subsequent money laundering operations. The documentation, meticulously researched and verified, destroyed generations of carefully constructed social standing overnight. Douglas Reynolds resigned from all public positions and boards. The family's charitable foundation collapsed as donors distanced themselves. Their social invitations dried up. The Reynolds name, once synonymous with old money respectability, became tainted beyond repair. Bryce had taken everything from them: their businesses, their reputation, their social standing, just as they had taken everything from him 5 years ago. Yet as he reviewed the morning headlines, Bryce felt only emptiness. The revenge he had methodically constructed had been executed flawlessly. Why then did victory taste so hollow? Chapter 9. Ashes of Empire. 1 year after destroying the Reynolds-Wexler alliance, Bryce Harmon stood atop the completed Axiom Tower, renamed Phoenix Tower, surveying the city that had once rejected him and now lay at his feet. His revenge had been complete and devastating. Tristan lived in obscurity in Connecticut. Douglas Reynolds had retreated to a family property in Europe. Vanessa had finally stopped calling 6 months ago, after Bryce's attorney delivered cease and desist papers. "Beautiful view," Miles commented, joining him on the helipad. "Worth the wait." Bryce didn't answer immediately. The satisfaction he'd expected to feel remained elusive. "It should be, but it isn't." "They've lost everything that mattered to them," Bryce admitted. "Yet I don't feel finished." "Because revenge doesn't heal the original wound," came a voice from behind them. Vivian Mercer approached, elegant as always in her tailored suit. "It just creates new ones." "Philosophical today, Vivian?" Bryce asked dryly. "Practical. You've accomplished your goal. Destroyed your enemies. Now what?" The question had been haunting Bryce for months. His single-minded focus on revenge had left no room for considering what might come after. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, Miles reminded him. "The acquisition of West Coast Technologies is on the agenda." As they descended to the executive floor, Bryce's assistant intercepted them with an urgent message. "Mr. Harmon, there's a woman in reception insisting on seeing you. She says her name is Vanessa Reynolds." Bryce and Miles exchanged glances. "Tell her I'm unavailable," Bryce instructed. "I did, sir. She says she has information about Antonio Diaz that you need to hear." The name caught Bryce's attention. Antonio Diaz had disappeared 3 months ago, shortly before he was scheduled to testify in a newly opened investigation into the helicopter crash. "Give me 5 minutes," Bryce told Miles, changing direction toward the reception area. Vanessa had aged visibly in the past year. Her designer clothes have been replaced by simpler attire, her perfect makeup by a more natural look. When she saw Bryce, she remained seated rather than rushing toward him as he had expected. "You mentioned Diaz," Bryce said without preamble. "What about him?" "He's dead," Vanessa stated flatly. "Apparent suicide in Mexico. The police found a note confessing that he lied about Tristan's involvement in your accident." Bryce's expression didn't change. "Why tell me this?" "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroy yourself." She met his gaze steadily. "The investigation will clear Tristan. The evidence you've built your revenge on will collapse. I thought you should hear it from me. Why would you warn me? I've systematically destroyed your family." "Because I loved you once," she answered simply. "Genuinely loved you, before fear and shallow values made me betray that love. Nothing I can say will ever make what I did right. But this information, consider it my final attempt at amends." For the first time in years, Bryce looked at Vanessa, truly looked at her, and saw not the woman who had abandoned him, but a human being carrying her own scars, albeit invisible ones. "What happens now?" he asked. "I'm leaving Lakeshire, starting over somewhere new." She stood, gathering her purse. "I hope you find whatever peace you're looking for, Bryce. Revenge hasn't given it to you. That much is clear from your eyes." After she left, Bryce returned to his office where Miles waited anxiously. "Diaz is dead," Bryce informed him. "Supposedly left a suicide note clearing Tristan." Miles cursed. "That complicates things. If the investigation clears Wexler." "It won't," Bryce interrupted, accessing his secure server. "Because Diaz didn't commit suicide. He was eliminated." "By whom?" "Tristan Wexler. He may be in Connecticut, but he still has resources." Bryce pulled up surveillance photos taken in Mexico. "These prove Wexler's connection to Diaz's death. I've had Tristan under surveillance since he left Lakeshire." Miles stared at him. "You anticipated this move?" "I anticipated everything." Bryce forwarded the evidence to his attorneys. "Tristan just upgraded his charges from attempted murder to actual murder. This ends today." Within hours, authorities in Connecticut arrested Tristan Wexler for orchestrating Antonio Diaz's murder. The evidence provided by Phoenix Ventures' private security firm was irrefutable. Tristan's desperate attempt to clear his name had instead sealed his fate. That evening, as Bryce sat alone in his penthouse, he finally opened the last voicemail Vanessa had left 6 months earlier. Her voice filled the room. "Bryce, I know you'll never listen to this. I know you'll never forgive me, nor should you. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you when you needed me most because I was shallow and afraid. I thought appearance was everything. Now I've lost everything that actually matters, and I understand what you felt. I'm not asking for reconciliation or forgiveness. I just want you to know that I recognize the pain I caused, and I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life. Goodbye, Bryce." Bryce deleted the message and walked to the window. Below, Lakeshire continued its evening rhythm, oblivious to the machinations that had reshaped its power structure. He had achieved everything he set out to do. His enemies were destroyed. His power was secure. Yet as he stood alone at the pinnacle of his revenge, Bryce Harmon realized that the scars that truly defined him weren't the visible ones on his face, but the invisible ones on his soul. Those would never heal as long as he remained imprisoned by the past. True freedom, he understood now, wouldn't come from destroying his enemies. It would come from finally walking away from the ruins of what they had taken from him and building something entirely new, something they had never touched. Bryce picked up his phone and dialed Miles. "Change of plans," he said when his friend answered. "Cancel the board meeting tomorrow. We're restructuring Phoenix Ventures, expanding, relocating. Lakeshire holds nothing for me now." "Where to?" Bryce looked out at the city one last time. "Somewhere I've never been. Somewhere without ghosts." As he ended the call, Bryce felt a weight lifting. Not the triumphant exhilaration he had expected from his completed revenge, but something quieter and more profound. He had proven to himself, to Vanessa, to everyone who had discounted him, that he could not be destroyed. Now, it was time to prove something else, that he could be more than the sum of his scars and his vengeance. The man who walked away from Lakeshire 3 weeks later bore little resemblance to either the optimistic contractor of 5 years ago or the vengeful tycoon of recent months. Bryce Harmon had finally embraced the truth that had eluded him throughout his campaign of retribution. His enemies hadn't defined him. His scars hadn't defined him. His revenge hadn't defined him. Only he could do that, and he chose to be unforgiving.